I think if we go 10 years back about the future of data or future of work, conversation within Cognizant and saying, okay, or starting this particular group, how has future of work evolved over the last 10 years? If you can walk us through, what are some of your stark observation as over the last decade?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's a nice way to think about it, to think about that journey. I mean, back in 2011, that phrase, the future of work, a few people were talking about that. Not that many people were talking about that and thinking about how work was changing as a consequence of increasing digitization in big businesses. We wrote the first kind of big book that we wrote about this in 2014 that we called Code Halos, which was about the digital fingerprint as it's now sort of understood. A code halo, as we described it, which back then in 2013, 2014 wasn't really well understood. This notion that every like, every swipe, every digital interaction you were having on your computer, your phone, on your smart wristband, that was creating this sort of digital fingerprint, this code halo. And that was really how Amazon were doing what they were doing. This is how the notion, if you like this book, you might like this book, or if you like this movie, you might like this movie. That notion of personalization was becoming kind of more apparent, but not many people had really figured out what that game was, how it was being played. So that book sort of got us on the map a little bit, and a lot of people were interested in that. Then in 2017, we wrote a book called What to Do When Machines Do Everything, which was about the power of artificial intelligence and machine learning. And again, if you think back to then, 2015, 2016, not many people had really realized at that stage that AI, which was something they'd seen in movies and read about in books and seen in TV shows, that was becoming a business tool and was going to become a really important business tool that would differentiate leaders from laggards going forward. So we pushed that book out. That did very well, got a lot of attention, really, again, steered into this idea that automating work was going to change work fundamentally. And also we argued in the book that automating work wasn't going to destroy work and human work wasn't going to go away. There was still going to be plenty of work in the future, but it was just going to be different work. And so we wrote about that. We pushed that book out. That was successful, as I said. We talked about that for a while. And then as we started to think about a third book, this was when really this notion of these ideas that we'd been looking at and sort of talking about, in a way, the positive power of these technologies, we could see that the dark side of those technologies was becoming very real. And so if you think about data, data is the heart to doing personalization, customization of services. It's the heart of how, again, that sort of Amazon model, that kind of mass personalized model, can delight us, can make us happy because we don't have to re-enter our information all the time. But at the same time, the dark side of that, the flip side of that, was this whole notion of surveillance. And some of your listeners will know the phrase surveillance capitalism, this idea that we've built a whole economy on basically surveilling people. And that sort of creepy side of that was becoming very real. And then, of course, in a national security context, that was a very big deal as well. And again, likewise, in the whole discussion around automation, that we could see that automating of some people's work away was actually part of the reason why there was so much political rancor in the world, so many people feeling they had sort of been left behind. And that motivated Brexit, and it motivated the elevation of President Trump. And so, again, we wanted to sort of look at these things and almost take a time out and say, look, we can clearly see a good path here. We can see a darker path, and we need to think about that. So really, this journey in the last 10 years about the future of work has all been about the power of technology, how central technologies become to our lives, and how we need to be able to manage technology and not let it manage us, because that's sort of what it feels like a little bit at the moment.
That is interesting. So over last 10 years, what are some of the stark surprises that you have surfaced when it comes to the perception of future of work and where actually it is going? So walk us through some of the surprises that you have seen over the last 10 years.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even today, Vishal, as we're recording this, people may have seen Microsoft buying Nuance for $16 billion. We've been talking about voice as a new kind of frontier, a new dimension for a while now in the sense of the future of work. This transition, we call it from the thumb, texting, to the voice, because we're going to talk to technology in the future predominantly, and technology is going to talk back to us. So that's a kind of example of something we saw on the edge of our radar, we were excited by, talked about, and now Microsoft's sort of buying into that market with $16 billion. I mean, that's just one example. The other one that I'm really interested in the moment, which is coming up, maybe still the future of work for a lot of people, but I think it's going to be a very big deal, is the notion of what's being called digital humans. The idea of the next generation of chatbots, if you like, where there's a visual representation of a human, which over particularly a kind of Zoom level of call, with the kind of the visual quality, the verisimilitude that you get on a kind of on a video call nowadays, you can't really tell the difference between that digital human and a real human. I mean, that's going to be a very, very big deal going forward. And so, I mean, we joke sometimes here at the Sense of the Future of Work that the future is always in the future. By definition, it always gives us something interesting to talk about tomorrow, because there's so much innovation going on, there's so much technology change going on. I mean, one other way I just frame it, Vishal, thinking a little bit further back than 10 years, but say the last 20 years, my father died in 1993. He was almost 80 then. He was an older dad. But I often think to myself, if he came back today and saw how we're living and how we're working, I mean, we are living in a science fiction movie from his perspective. You know, he'd never had a computer, never used the internet, wouldn't know what an app was, wouldn't know what a smartphone it was, wouldn't know what a smartwatch would be, wouldn't know what GPS was, wouldn't know what AI was, wouldn't know what Shazam was. All these technologies that we now use quite routinely have all come up in a very, very short period of time. And we are, to somebody just a short generation ago, 20 years ago, we are literally living in a science fiction movie now. And that's kind of amazing, kind of exciting, particularly if you like science fiction.